Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. France, Germany, UEFA Nations League, League A, two most recent World Cup winners. Would Germany be able to bounce back from their poor World Cup showing? How would France handle the pressure as World Cup champions? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to break down France against Germany. So France, Germany doesn't get really bigger than that. Two European super powerhouses. In today's video, we're going to break down how Germany started so well, why France encountered some issues, and those 2 points kind of combine with each other. Then the final point we're going to get to is what happened in the second half. When we do break things down, we look at Germany 4-3-3, 4-1-4-1, 4-2-3-1 with Kroos dropping off a bit deeper. A lot of formation, a lot of interchanging. Up front, they went with Marco Reus. Expected probably to drop a bit deeper and break him behind, but he was a center figure. Out in wide areas, they had Muller and Werner interchanging positions. Sometimes Werner on the left, sometimes on the right. With Werner, he wants to cut in. He likes to drive forward, carry the ball, run at fullbacks. Thomas Muller trying to find space to either link play or to get into good goal scoring opportunities to create chances and score goals. Then we look into midfield. You got the control of Kroos, who did drop deeper to get on the ball on occasion. Kimmich sitting in the holding role just beside him, or sometimes slightly behind him when he did look to push forward. And then you had Goretzka, who played a bit higher, obviously looking to try and get the ball between the lines, and he was one of their focal points in attack. And then you look out in wider areas, not going with the adventurous fullbacks, going with Ginter, going with Rudiger, who obviously offer that cover but are athletic enough to get forward, provide crosses into the box, overlapping runs, underlapping runs. Then at the back, they go with Hummels, Boateng, able to push forward and to deliver long balls, long diagonals to help Germany build out of the back. With that being said, that is how the Germans lined up. And then we get to France. What would you expect from them? World Cup champions Didier Deschamps didn't really tinker with much, awarding or rewarding the players that won the World Cup the opportunity to continue in their shape and to go forward. That means that Griezmann and Giroud were up front. Giroud, the target man, looking to link play, looking to pull defenders into him. Griezmann trying to break him behind, trying to link play with his teammates, trying to score some goals, trying to find space in behind Kimmich. Then we get into the wider areas. Mbappe's pace, the counter-attacking threat that he possesses. Out on the left-hand side, Matuidi, they stuck with that to offer the balance. Matuidi able to do the defensive role, able to drive into the left channel, able to form that midfield 3 when required. And it would be required here against a German side that likes to play through the midfield. Out in midfield, Pogba and Conte protecting the back four. Obviously, he's trying to get Pogba a bit forward, but in this system, he is disciplined, sitting beside Conte, ensuring that nothing gets in behind them. And then in the wider areas, Pavard and Hernandez rewarded for their great World Cup performances. And then you have the athleticism of Umtiti and Varane to ensure that if anything gets behind the fullbacks or gets into those channels, they're there to sweep it up. No Hugo Lloris. Areola steps in. Lloris is hurt, and Areola did a pretty good job. When we look at it as a whole, it was going to be a good game. Who was going to take control of possession? Who was going to drop off a bit deeper? And that is how we really have to break into this game, because Germany wanted to be on the ball. France obviously sat a bit deeper, and it was about would France be able to counterattack and how Germany would break them down. So first, let's get to what Germany did right in the first half. When we look at them as a whole, obviously, we know in the World Cup, they had Kroos sitting in the front of the center backs. They had the fullbacks extremely high. They were hit on the counterattack. Here, Rudiger and Ginter were very meticulous with how they pushed up the field, weren't over-adventurous, but when there was space to attack, they did, and that was one of the key elements of the game. France ended up dropping off deeper throughout. They had the two center backs kind of sitting, or the two strikers sitting on Kimmich, and then if Kroos dropped in, they would look to cover Kroos. So what happens is that it allowed Boateng and Hummels to break forward. They were pivotal. What happened here is that Matuidi, obviously without the ball, dropped in, and Mbappe was very narrow as well. So France's line wasn't too bad. They did ensure that space was covered in between the lines and in midfield, but there was a lot of space in wide areas, and that was where Germany was getting at them. In the earlier stages, the long ball, the long diagonal that ends up seeing Muller Muller peel off Hernandez and pick it up in the right channel, where Hernandez came across to ensure that that ball was cut out, so there was no cross delivered. We saw Cruz pick up the ball from a deeper position, play that diagonal to Ginter, who peeled off Hernandez when Muller was narrow. What happened there is that his cross goes into the box, and you have Conte cut it off, so that was a big worry. But that was kind of how they were going about things. They were really looking to play those diagonals, try to get forward. There was another time where Boateng had stepped forward. You had Muller and Werner switch spots, switch sides. What happens is that the diagonal comes out, and what happens here is that Ginter is able to run at Pavard, cut in, and then fire a low shot on goal. That was probably Germany's best chance in the first half. They weren't really getting balls to Royce because he wasn't really varying his movement. He was staying central and they couldn't get balls into that space. But what happened as the game wore on is that they were finding space in those wider areas. When what happened was that sometimes they'd have Muller and they'd have Werner kind of tuck in a bit, and that would give space to the wider fullbacks in Ginter and Rudiger to kind of come forward, and that would force the fullbacks to kind of push out of position, and that's kind of what they wanted. But again, they were unable to connect those low crosses into the box, and that was a big issue for them. We look at two of their best chances where, again, that did happen, and it was stemmed from France's breakdown. We look at one opportunity where Boateng does push forward. He finds a pocket of space between Matuidi and between Conte, slides it into Muller, who instantly pushes it out to Ginter. His cross is cleared for a corner. We look at another opportunity minutes later where it's Hummels this time, finding space between Conte and Pogba for Goretzka to pick up the ball, and he instantly slides it out to Rudiger, but again, his cross is cleared. Germany, again, heavily focusing on those wider areas, trying to get crosses into the box, low crosses, because they don't have an aerial threat in Marco Reus, but that is where they were getting down. France were dropping a bit too deep, a bit too narrow. There were spaces in wide areas, but they were lucky to get away with it solely based on the fact that Germany's crosses, one, weren't really good enough. Two, obviously you have to look at the French center backs in the midfield for doing a great job in clearing them. Three, they do lack an aerial threat, but that's how they were getting forward. Boateng and Hummels were able to push forward. Cruz was eventually finding space. Rudiger and Ginter were able to push forward, and Werner was a threat out in wide areas. And France had nothing really to cope with it, but they did well in defending their box and defending central spaces, and they were able to get off the hook. Then we get to France. One of their biggest problems in the World Cup was they struggled to break down teams. They didn't look convincing in that regard. A lot of the goals they scored in the knockout stages were from set pieces or against a very poor Argentinian side. And in the World Cup final, they relied on the counterattack when Croatia had to push forward. So it'd be interesting to see how they created chances here. And they struggled for the most part. Like I said, Germany had most of the possession, but when Germany didn't have possession, what they would drop into is more of a 4-4-1-1. And what that does leave is that Kimmich would protect the space and right ahead of the back four. They'd have the front players kind of move a bit narrow. So what you have here is this. How are they going to break that down? When you think about a lot of the chances that they did create throughout the first half, they didn't create much. And that was the biggest problem. Their key outlet prior to their best chance in the final minute of the half stemmed from Hernandez breaking forward. He was constantly getting past Timo Werner. On one occasion, he got past Werner, broke free. Boateng came across, got past Boateng, and then earned a corner. There was another time where he was able to push forward after Griezmann dropped a bit deeper. What happened here is that the midfield, the defensive line of Germany's is pretty narrow. They slide the ball to Hernandez. He breaks past Werner, delivers a cross that's overhit. But for the most part, they struggled. Griezmann got into space when he did get into space in these pockets in Germany's third. He wasn't connecting his passes. We didn't get much from Pogba. Mbappe playing a bit too narrow, and he was often crowded out when he did try to get on the ball, over touching it, trying to beat too many markers. He was often crowded out in that space. You think about their best chance, it does stem from Mbappe playing a bit more narrow, but at the same time, you just feel like France still aren't that side that are able to really create chances out of nothing. They don't have that creator. Antoine Griezmann isn't it. They struggle to create chances here. For the most part, they did sit deeper. They were playing more of a cautious game and looking to break on the counterattack. That didn't really go for them. But we look at their best chance. What it does stem from is, again, You have Rudiger kind of sticking tight to Mbappe as he does pull out into a higher position. What happens is that Varane is able to push forward. What happens here is that he's able to play a pass between Werner and Cruz. You have Mbappe kind of pushing off to pick it up. He picks it up, now it's panic, because what happens here is that Pavard is able to drive in behind that Werner, plays it in there, and then he's able to push forward. You have Giroud breaking forward. What happens here is that Giroud is able to drag markers with him, because that leads one player pushing out. Giroud drags the center backs with him. You have Matuidi breaking in, and what happens is that Ginter tracks his run, able to make the interception. But what happens now is that it falls to Mbappe. Mbappe is able to play that low cross in. Giroud is marked by Boateng, and he's only able to flash the shot inches wide. But apart from that, France really struggled to create any chances. A lot of it came down Hernandez. Germany, for the most part, when you look at their 4-1-4-1, what happened here is that they could have Kimmich on Griezmann. They have the center backs dealing with Giroud because he's not that much of a threat against Boateng or Hummels, who are also very good in the air. Then when we look at it as a whole, what happens now is that they want to push forward. They have Conte, they have Goretzka and Kroos sitting on Conte and Pogba. They want to push the fullbacks forward. That's the job of Muller and Werner. Obviously, Werner was struggling against Hernandez and he's struggling against Pavard. And then with Mbappe dropping a bit narrow, Rudiger could just tuck in and compress that space. And then out there you have Ginter as well. And Matuidi is more of a central midfielder, so he wasn't really offering much of a direct threat. France's side, very good in sense of being able to soak up pressure, but not offering much of a threat when they were forced to create chances. And that was one of their downfalls in the first half, and it continued in the second half. When we think about the second half, nothing really changed. We saw France kind of press higher a bit in the opening stages, trying to win the ball. It didn't really work out for them. They ended up dropping off deeper once again. And what happened here was they didn't really create many chances. You think about the chances they did create, besides the counterattack where Griezmann played in Mbappe, but he wasn't able to get onto it. You think about one opportunity where they're a bit forward. You have Conte getting the ball. Matuidi ends up dragging Goretzka out of position, and that leaves space for Griezmann to get the ball. Griezmann ends up playing the ball into that space where Matuidi runs off Goretzka. The cross is being played into the box, but Hummels ended up getting across before Giroud. But besides that, France really struggled as a whole. Pogba did force Neuer into a save after that, but again, just dropping off deeper, no real counter-attacking threat. They ended up taking off Giroud and bringing on Dembele at some point, and then pushing Mbappe higher to obviously try and exploit his pace against this German backline, but it didn't really work out in that favor. And it's really odd that Mbappe didn't start up front, allow his pace to run in behind Boateng and Hummels. They didn't utilize that. It didn't work out here. And again, it was about Germany trying to break down France. And what happened here was that a lot of the play ended up coming through Timo Werner. You look at the opening stages, he ended up making a lot of darting runs from the inside into that space. One time Conte tracked him very well. Another time Varane came across and made a very good sliding tackle. He was really looking to get involved. The other aspect was that Kroos now, as they dropped deeper, was ending up to get on the ball more, switching play out to Werner, running at Pavard on the outside. He always had the beating of him, and that was a big issue for France. He was getting forward. At one point, Dembele even came over trying to stop that happening, but it wasn't working there. But again, not much from Werner in that aspect. Able to stretch the play, able to get past his marker, but no real threat in the final third. Germany also had a counterattack, and it was one of the brighter moments from Marco Reus, where Conte had ended up losing the ball, and he was able to run past Varane, run past Pogba. You had Hummels breaking in. He slides it to Hummels, who then finds Muller. Muller chests it down, tries to acrobatically kick it. It ends up falling to Hummels, who forces Areola into a save. Areola made several good saves in the second half. One from Royce, where he picked it up from Goretzka, who was free to get the ball after Ginter broke forward past Matuidi, but his save was pushed over. We had one chance where Muller had drifted over, cut in on Dembele, and curled an effort on goal, but Areola pushed it over the net. But as a whole, this game did have that friendly feel in the sense that teams weren't really going for it. You felt like France could offer a bit more, but here they just ended up staying packed in, and they tried to limit the space. They conceded space out in wider areas, but they didn't have much of a counter-attacking threat. They didn't really test Manuel Neuer, and that was a big problem for them. Whereas for Germany, they found the space in the wide areas with Rudiger, with Ginter. They moved to Timo Werner, who was able to push out wide and offer a threat in that sense. They didn't get much from Royce, and that was a big deal. And that was something that they need to really think about, because yes, they could dominate and overload the wider areas like they've done at the World Cup and here in this friendly, but who is there to finish the chances in the box? That's the big worry for Germany going forward. They looked better defensively here with Kimmich, Kroos, and Goretzka. Some mobility, some athleticism in midfield. Whereas for France, again, they can sit deep. They have the counter-attacking threat, but can they break teams down? Can they create chances out of nothing? The type of football that they do play is suited for knockout competition, but here it just isn't going to cut it to win individual games when you need to. It's not always consistent, and we saw why that was. Not enough goal-scoring threat, and that was a big problem for them, and Didier Deschamps is going to have to do something to fix that. But let me know what you guys think. Can France be better if they play this way? What about Germany? Who should be their main man up front? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.